NFL drafts for a long time, and I know the difference between an organization going through the motions and an organization that walked into draft weekend with a coherent. This wasn't flashy. There were no dramatic decision-making across 8 picks, and when you actually break down what was acquired and why it fits, the picks wasn't a situation where two fan bases were building passionate competing cases for their guy and nobody really knew. Mendoza was the pick. Everyone in the building knew it. The league knew it, and that certainty meant the Raiders didn't spend a single ounce of organizational energy sweating the top selection. They spent it on what comes after, and what comes after is where this draft gets genuinely interesting. Because the pick I want to start with, the one that made me stop and look twice when it came across, is Mike Washington Jr. in the 4th round. And the round number alone does not begin to tell this story, so let me give you the full context. There is an athletic evaluation metric called the RAS score. It takes a composite of every measurable athletic data point and produces a score out of 10. A perfect 10 is theoretical. In the entire history of the database, covering more than 2,100 running backs evaluated going back to 1987, you essentially never see it. Mike Washington Jr. scored a perfect 10. The #1 ranked athletic profile at his position in that entire database, spanning nearly 4 decades of evaluation. That is not a small distinction. That is a generational athletic profile by the most rigorous composite measurement available. And the Las Vegas Raiders acquired him in the 4th round after trading up to secure him, with a pre-draft projection that had him going in rounds 2 or 3. And here is what makes the profile even more rare. He has the size to match the speed. 6'1", 223 pounds. That is a legitimate NFL frame at the position. The reason perfect RAS scores are so rare at running back is that you almost never get both dimensions simultaneously. You get size without elite speed, or speed without imposing size. Washington has both, and he was somehow still on the board deep into day 3. Now drop that profile into the roster situation waiting for him in Las Vegas. Ashton Jeanty is already there as the featured back, one of the most explosive young running backs in the league. Washington alongside him gives you something completely different in the same backfield. A bigger, physically dominant complement who handles a different dimension of the run game, who creates entirely different defensive problems because you cannot solve both of them with the same approach. For a team that wants to run the football and protect a developing franchise quarterback, having 2 legitimate weapons in that room doesn't just improve your running back depth, it changes your offensive identity. This pick was a steal. There is no more honest way to say it. Now let me talk about Trey Zuether, the center out of Texas A&M, because this might be the selection that holds up as the single best value pick in the entire draft when you look back at this class in a few years. 6'6", 312 pounds, 4-year starter for the Aggies, first-team All-SEC. Read that again carefully, because what it describes is not a developmental project or a raw athlete you're investing in speculatively. This is a player with documented, sustained, proven production at one of the most competitive conferences in college football, at a position that every single NFL team is desperately trying to fill, and the Raiders got him in round 3. Interior offensive linemen with that resume do not last into the 3rd round under normal circumstances. Teams hoard them. The draft market treats them as premium assets. Las Vegas had the patience and the pick capital to stay disciplined, and they came away with a 4-year starter who can compete for an immediate role. For a team building a new offensive identity around a rookie quarterback, having a legitimate, experienced anchor at center isn't merely useful. It is foundational. Every element of the run game and the pass protection structure flows through that position on every single snap. Getting that player in round 3 is the kind of value acquisition that front offices talk about years later. And the broader point about how this draft was constructed deserves attention, because it reveals something important about organizational discipline. The Raiders came in with real capital across the middle rounds, and instead of scattering it across positional needs or reaching for specific slots on the depth chart, they just kept finding good football players. Round after round, they identified talent and acquired it. That sounds simple. It is not simple. It is the discipline that separates organizations that build sustainable rosters from the ones that spend every draft chasing last year's problems and never actually get ahead of them. When you have a new coaching staff, a new quarterback, and a clear organizational vision, the right draft philosophy is to collect talent. The pieces find their positions when the talent level is high enough. Las Vegas appears to understand that, and this draft reflects it. 5th round brought another name worth your attention. Dalton Johnson, safety, ran a 4.40 40 with 285 career tackles. A 440 safety with that kind of production and physicality in run support in round 5 is exactly the kind of depth and upside acquisition that wins games in December when rosters thin out and the depth chart gets genuinely tested. You add a player like that in the 5th round, and the outcome is a win in either direction. He either develops into a starting role or becomes one of the most valuable special teams contributors on your roster. Both outcomes justify the investment. Neither is a disappointment. That's how you build a roster that holds up across a full season. 8 total picks. The structure concentrated in rounds 2 through 5, where roster building actually happens, where you find the players who fill out your starting lineup and make your stars better. The Raiders executed that structure precisely and came away with something that, when you look at it as a complete class, tells a coherent story rather than a collection of independent decisions made in isolation. Now step back, because I think it's genuinely important to appreciate the full scope of what this organization has accomplished across this entire offseason, not just draft weekend. You came in with a coaching vacancy at the most important position in the building. Solved, and Clint Kubiak generated the kind of immediate credibility that had over 60 players showing up on day 1 of a voluntary offseason program. That number does not happen accidentally. That is a coach people want to play for, and players communicate that preference with their feet before they ever say a word publicly. You had a decade-long question mark at quarterback. Solved. Fernando Mendoza is a Raider. A Heisman Trophy winner with elite composure, refined football intelligence, and a profile that fits this offensive system with the kind of natural alignment that you cannot manufacture through coaching alone. Max Crosby was already in the building as one of the most disruptive defensive players in the league. Ashton Jeanty arrived as one of the most explosive young offensive weapons in the country. Kirk Cousins came in as a veteran who has operated this exact offensive system and can mentor Mendoza from a position of genuine relevant experience rather than generic veteran presence. The defensive interior was addressed in free agency, linebacker depth and leadership was added, and then the draft delivered a perfect 10 athlete at running back, an all-SEC center in round 3, a hard-hitting speed safety in round 5, and a collection of contributors who fit the identity of what this coaching staff is explicitly trying to build. That is a complete offseason, not a collection of individual moves that each make sense in isolation, a connected sequence of decisions with a coherent vision running through all of them simultaneously. And when was the last time you could genuinely say that about this franchise? When was the last time every significant offseason decision connected back to the same organizational understanding of what this team is and what it's trying to become? There's something happening in Las Vegas right now that reminds me, and I know this comparison is going to land with weight for people who watched it unfold in real time, of what it felt like when Dan Campbell arrived in Detroit. Before he coached a single professional game, the energy was different. The culture was different in a way you could feel before you could prove it. Players were bought in before the season started, and that instinct, that feeling that this time the foundation being laid is actually real, turned out to be correct. Detroit built something genuine and sustained. That energy, that specific quality of organizational coherence where every decision connects to every other decision and the people inside the building feel it before the rest of the league does. That is what is emanating from Las Vegas right now. Is everything solved? No, and I won't pretend otherwise. The receiver room still carries real questions that will need to be answered during the season. The secondary depth will be tested as it always is across a full NFL year. And ultimately, none of what's been built in this offseason means anything until it gets executed on a football field against real competition, when the pressure is real and the outcomes are permanent. We know that. Every honest football conversation has to acknowledge that. But the foundation being laid right now in Las Vegas is real. The decisions being made are connecting to each other in a way that actually tells a story. And the story is an organization that finally, genuinely, knows what it's trying to build, has the people in place to build it, and spent this offseason proving that with every significant decision it made. The era starts now.